hola, and marhaba to another episode of Gen Z Amigas Weekly Podcast, where we explore the defining experiences of Gen Z women navigating life in an ever-changing world. I'm your host, Maha Hana, and today we're shaking the table a bit, asking a question that makes some people uncomfortable. And that question is, what if history is just a story that we all agreed upon? How much of what we call the truth is curated, censored, or even completely made up? From 9/11 conspiracies to the theory of the recently hidden underground beneath the Giza pyramids, and of course, the claim that Neil Armstrong maybe never landed on the moon. And so we're diving into this blurry space between fact, fiction, and control. And so, because here's the real question: why do we trust these narratives so deeply? And who gets to decide what becomes, the truth? And so, to help unpack that, I'm joined by two guests who aren't afraid to answer that question, and that's Lara Fontanella and Hala Dokh, who will be joining us today. So, thank you so much for joining, girls. And so, let's get straight into it. So, let's start at the foundation. Schools, textbooks, news media. Most of us growing up believing the version of history we're taught, in school and classrooms, what we see on our phones. But, we never really question, and that question is, what if that version was never neutral to begin with? So, Hala, I want to start with you. Was there kind of any moment you realized a story about history might not have been as objective as it seemed? Like something just didn't really add up. There was a blurred line.
Like I don't have a specific story in mind, but I just like realized because I moved abroad to study university and I realized that a lot of stories or a lot of things that I never questioned before, I started to question nowadays and research more. And that led me to like have more critical thinking rather than just believing what I used to believe or just studying. Because I feel like also when you're in school, for example, you just study what you're given and then that's your day. Like you don't have time to discover things on your own or have the freedom to have free time to question things. So I just feel like whenever I came to university, I had more free time to search more things and question more things that I didn't know before.
Yeah, it's as if like now that we haven't just been given a textbook or a piece of paper that shows some history, we don't just believe it. Now we question things. So, I mean, that's good because we don't want to be given false stories and things about history. And Laura, moving on to you, I wanted to ask, when I mentioned earlier about like the Egyptians, and when you think about how ancient civilizations like Egypt are taught in school, do you feel like we're getting the full story or just, the Western version of things?
I feel like kind of neither because I think it's hard to get a full story when obviously there's no one from that time to tell us like what happened. And I think that can be like applied to anything. Like we weren't there like in ancient Egypt. We also weren't there like even like recent events, just any kind of like controversy events like protests or things like that. Like we weren't there, so we won't get the full story of that either. So I think we're definitely not getting the full story, but I don't think it's like from a malicious intent. I think obviously ancient Egypt also had, their own like language and their own there's like letters from ancient Egypt and we take like we try translate that to like the language that we have now, but it's impossible because like we will genuinely never know. So I mean it is a Western. We are getting the Western story of it, but that's because like it's the only story that we can get. If it was any other way, like we wouldn't understand. But I think
Mm.
it's really interesting to think about like no one from that time is here anymore, so we'll genuinely like never know. And then people can say that about now as well, like 2025. So
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also like I feel that would be the same for us for COVID, for the people of the future. Like there will be many stuff in history books that might have not been true because like things travel in the wrong way and people over exaggerate everything. So it might not be as we lived in it because it's just when stories get told, they get changed and you won't get the true one unless you lived in that period.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you added, Hala, about how when we were in the global pandemic, you know, in 200 years from now, like people may not know the full truth because, like you said, stories get twisted, and I guess we'll never know. And Lara, bringing onto your point about how Egypt, like, there's no one from that time now, so it's impossible to have the exact truth, you could argue. And we could also say that history isn't just about facts, it's about, perspective. And depending on who is telling the story, the same event can sound like a victory, a tragedy, or even propaganda. Like you said, it's being twisted. But let's talk about the events that sparked real conspiracy and, real global doubt. Now we're heading into the rabbit hole, 9/11, the underground city allegedly beneath the Gaza pyramids, and the ever persistent moon landing conspiracy. And, these aren't just TikTok theories. They've been debated, researched, and, challenged for years. So, what happens when a generation like ours starts to asking what if the official version isn't the full truth? So, Laura, I wanted to ask you if, I mean, you don't need to know any details about 9/11, but, let's go there. 9/11. Why do you think so many people, even today, still believe parts of the event were covered up or manipulated and that it was, there's a conspiracy that it was actually the American government that planned that or etc. So what do you think about that?
I think a lot of the conspiracy theories are really interesting to like look into, and maybe some of them are even true. But honestly, I think that the reason why like people come up with these like elaborate theories is because they genuinely can't believe that that happened, especially because it was in 2001, it was like the first kind of big, especially in the United States, like the terrorist attack.
Hmm.
So I think honestly it started because like people come up with these theories because they they had no other option. Nothing like this had ever happened before. So they were, trying to um make it look like it happened for any other reason than for the fact that, it was a tragedy. So yeah, I think it just comes from like genuine, I guess, like sometimes they can't really accept the fact that something so tragic happened. But then I also like I can see both sides. Like there are theories that like are like some things like don't match up with each other. But I think that is like with any attack or any like event, like there's always gonna be a theory.
Yeah, and I think you can some things are always not what they seem and you
Mhm.
can be hidden in, the dark about it. And so Hala, I wanted to ask you also about another kind of recent discovery you could say online that there's been talk about this ancient underground city beneath the pyramids in Egypt. Do you think we've do you think maybe first of all it's not completely true and it's just people, making up things, but there's been research that, actual scientists did experiments about sound waves under the pyramids and that they found that there's this underground city. Do you think that if it's true, we've been deliberately kept in the dark about it? Or maybe it could
Um,
be new technologies?
Honestly, yeah, I was gonna say like I've seen that before on social media and
Yeah.
like I didn't completely deny it, but I didn't completely believe it, you know? Like I feel okay, there are many things that aren't discovered, like the ocean, it's very deep, like people haven't discovered it and not like it's just we some people like in the past, for example, they didn't have the tools to know these things. So maybe it's just now that they have more technologies in order to discover these things, in order to like become aware of places that we haven't discovered before. So I feel like it's just people like to make a big deal out of everything and say, oh, we haven't been told the truth, or oh, like it's just I don't know. Sometimes I think that it's just with these new technologies and it's people with these new technologies and especially like as Laura said, like we don't know what happened in the past. So I just think that with these new technologies, they would be able to discover new things, and it might not be that they're just trying to hide it from us. It's just they're discovering it. And yeah, and I feel like people like nowadays, because we have more voice and people use their voice. So sometimes people just use their voice in the wrong way and they want to attack the government and stuff like that, saying, oh, we haven't been told the truth. But it, like, I don't know. Yeah.
I think
Yes. Yeah.
just like it's like more overall about the like the
Hmm.
hidden like city that they found whatever under the pyramids. I think it like 100% like could like is like could be possible because I think people underestimate like humans and like especially like in ancient Egypt, like they built those like huge pyramids like in Giza and like it's 100% plausible for something like an entire like city or tunnels to be found underneath because um at that time, although they don't have the tools that we have now, they still managed to do so much. So I think it's definitely possible and just I think sometimes like we can't really believe that humans could have done that, especially like thousands of years ago. But it's definitely like something that I think is super interesting to take a look at because like the same humans that are living now were the humans that built those pyramids and did those tunnels. So I think it's definitely like plausible.
Yeah, great point. I mean, I think, I mean, you both said how, Lara, you were saying how, people underestimate humans and humans built huge, huge, huge monuments that now us humans, present day, are seeing all over the world and we all think when we see a huge cathedral that was built years and years and years ago, and we think, how did humans do that? So, and Hala, your point about technology and how maybe it's not that we are being told not the full truth, but now that we have the resources to find out possibly the truth from the past, we get it now, you know? So I think both your points are very valid and kind of a different perspective from just blaming, blaming, blaming. And I want to kind of move on to our third point about how, we live in this world where TikTok threads and Wikipedia links can spark deeper curiosity than school ever did. It can lead us down different paths and different thoughts that people have about past events. But is that a good thing, or are we just making it easier for lies to spread rather than facts, So, Hala, I wanted to ask you and bring on to your point from previously. Do you trust what you learn online more than what you learned in class? Or how do you know what's real, or how do you dictate what's real?
Honestly, like recently we had a law class, and in that law class, our professor kept saying and like telling us to always check our sources and be critical about what we see. So I feel like it's just where whatever and wherever you learn, people need to, and I think it's more common right now because people always use their voice and they have like the individual has more power nowadays. So I feel like it's just where whatever information you get, you need to learn how to know figure out your sources, who said that, who said this, and like just not believe anything you see, whether it was in class or online. I feel like it just depends on the individual nowadays, and it's because people have been more individualized now. So I think individually, if people are more critical and like they figure out the correct way to trust these sources, then everything will be okay. It's just some people are misled and there's a lot of misinformation and they just seem to believe that information without critically thinking about it. And that's where everything goes wrong because they just believe the things that might not be true. And then there will be a lot of this misinformation. And yeah, that's what I believe.
Misinformation, yeah, I like that term, I think people can maybe take it a step too far, and I think where stories maybe get lost in some kind of way is because when people see things online, like you said, they may not critically think enough and maybe go speak to someone who spreads a message. And in that way, maybe stories could be mistold and, like you said, misinformation again. And so, Laura, I wanted to ask you in terms of that kind of, you know, balancing open-mindedness and critical thinking. When do you say, or when you see a story online, okay, that's too far, you know?
Um,
When is that for you?
I think it's a really hard line to like establish, especially nowadays, obviously, like you said, with like social media and how fast information and misinformation can be spread. But I think actually it's quite not easy, but simple to say like enough is enough is probably, I think, when, there's been tragedies and like lives lost and people are still kind of like reinforcing the idea that, oh, like reinforcing conspiracy theories even after seeing like tragedy and people actually like grieving other people, which I think it's hard because obviously if you think the event didn't happen, then obviously you also think no lives were lost. But at the same time, I think like grief is such a sensitive topic, and I don't think you should um like kind of like brush apart like someone's real like experience just because you saw this thing on TikTok or because Wikipedia told you that like it didn't happen or things like that. So yeah, I'd probably say when actual like deaths have happened and people are still kind of like denying it, I'd say.
Yeah. Um, Great point. And in the end, history isn't just about what happened. Like you guys said, it's about who tells it, who benefits from it, who's left out, who has the knowledge and the critical thinking skills, and, in some ways, the maturity to research and resources. Like our law professor said, check your resources and your sources because you never know who is saying these things. It could be a 12-year-old student for all we know. So in terms of that, we really have to gauge our the knowledge that we are consuming. And if Gen Z is known for anything, it's for refusing to take anything at face value. So history matters. I think what we could gauge from a kind of conclusion, but it matters more when you understand that it's layered. It shapes the power, it's shaped by power, it's shaped by politics, culture, and in some ways silence. And I'm not saying we should believe every conspiracy theory on the internet, but I am saying we should ask ourselves who's telling the story, what do they have to lose or gain? And by telling it that way, questioning it isn't dangerous, blind trust is. And I think that's all the time we have for today. So that's a wrap on this week's episode of Gen Z Amigas. Thank you so much, Hala and Lara, for going deep into the conversation with curiosity and courage. You've both brought very, very interesting perspectives that I haven't even thought of. And I think what we can gauge from this is to always have an open mind. And yes, it is a good thing to learn about new facts that we never discovered about historical events, but also to our listeners, what's a story from history that you've also questioned, or a theory that maybe you rethink what truth even means? So let us know in the comments and keep the convo going on Climate Pen Pal's LinkedIn, Climate Pen Pal Media's LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, goodbye, adios, and ma salama.